Hello and welcome to another tutorial. To follow along with this one, you're going to need to go over to blenderartist.org and find this Sculpt Alphas thread. There's a guy called Rix and another guy that have developed this, one of the add-ons we're using in this video, and you'll need to find it there. So to start, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be turning Blender 2.9 into, well, we're going to be implementing some of the quality of life improvements you'd find in software like ZBrush or 3D Coat. So to start off with, I'm just making a brush alpha here in Substance Designer. You don't have to use Substance Designer for this. You can use Photoshop, or you could use Affinity Photo, or pretty much any image editor. Pretty much any grayscale image will work as a brush alpha, or a brush mat, or you can find packs of them online for free. So I prefer to make my own because I get a lot of control over how they're made. And you do really need these when you're sculpting in Blender. One place also to get them is Blender Kit. That's not always the best place though, because many of the brush alphas on Blender Kit tend to be all style, no substance. They tend to be quite overly engineered, things like zippers and buttons, and if that's what you need, then go for it. But 99 times you're gonna want a normal alpha. So when I've made the alpha, I just save them into PNGs, into a folder structure, and I start now by just dimming out the viewport and changing some of the viewport shading, because that's one of the nice things when you're working in ZBrush, is you get that nice darker background. So I just quickly start by implementing that. And I do this both in the 3D viewport and the sculpting window. And it just gives you a little bit more contrast and lets you focus down on your model. It's been... yeah, in sculpting software, the darker backgrounds, they're deliberately chosen to keep the artist focused on what they're doing. So now I'm going to get rid of the default cube and add in a sphere and a multi-resolution modifier to start off with. This would be exactly the same kind of process as you'd use with multi-res and ZBrush. Again, this tutorial is on Blender, so we're not going to end up with a workflow that's exactly like ZBrush. But it's gonna get you some of the quality of life stuff. So I go over and I choose the red clay matte cap, like in ZBrush. And now we're starting to get something that looks to the eye similar, and I'm just testing out how everything's working and testing that I'm liking the shading on things. This isn't one of the major functional improvements, but I personally think that the red clay look on the dark background is really one of the things that attracts users to ZBrush. So one of the things I did was I went into the object view and I went to the object tab of the outliner, and I turned on wireframe so that I can see the wireframe over the mesh. And now I'm going in and I'm adding in what is now the texture manager but was the alpha manager in the thread that I showed you at the beginning. And that's a really useful tool. What it allows you to do is in the preferences of that add-on you can select a folder, and then the alphas that you create you can put in that folder, and they will then be persistent into Blender. So I just start by selecting one of the pinch alphas that I had created before. And this adds some pinch or crease functionality to the default drawing brush in the sculpt view. And the reason that we need to use an alpha for this is that there's two ways that you can pinch something when you're sculpting, and Blender does it one way, this does it another, and you need both. So the next thing I add in is B surfaces, but we don't need that just yet. And then we have another one, which is the extra brush options that we add in here as well, which is really useful. So what the extra brush options is it just lets you tap space and get all the options for your brushes like you would again in 3D Koto or ZBrush. And I think that's quite a big quality of life improvement. So from here we just sculpt away a bit. Yeah, when you add these alphas in as well, you need to change. Yeah, you need to change sometimes the way that the alpha maps to the surface, which is just below the preview of the alpha. So we just speed through me doing a very, very rudimentary sculpt. Here, before we get to the later part of this, one thing that I actually didn't get a recording of here is we have the remesh modifier to work with as well, and that gives you a sort of voxel remeshing of your sculpts, which can be useful, but you don't need to use that. Yeah, this is sort of where most of the quality of life stuff comes in, is with that, and it's not going to be as good as ZBrush. It's only Blender's sculpt engine. It's not the best there is out there. So now I head back over into Object View, and now we're looking at the B surfaces modifier. This is a retopology tool, again, like you'd get in ZBrush or those kind of apps, and it lets you draw lines on, and it's really, really useful because it automatically sets up face snapping and a shrink wrap modifier for you to start retopologizing. So when you come in, you can just start, when you edit into the base mesh it's created, you can just start extruding, and all of the kind of, yeah, all the retopology mapping presets are done for you, so you can just start adding your edge flows where you want them. If you wanted this to have the same kind of look as again ZBrush, you would just go in and change the default material over to something more matte cappy up in the corner. One thing to note when you're doing this type of operation is quite a lot of the time you're going to want to play with the offset on the shrink wrap modifier so that you're not working intersecting. It's always best, well, I like it best to retopologize slightly over the original mesh so you get everything done at a slight offset. It means you lose some detail, but it makes it much quicker to work. Yeah, so that's how to get a ZBrush-ish workflow within Blender. I hope that you enjoyed watching, and I hope that this has been useful. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.